Your Majesty, Queen Sylvia, Your Royal Highness, Princess Madeline, Deputy Mayor Berry, Excellencies of many wonderful global organizations, colleagues, friends, students, Columbia community. It's wonderful to be together this morning in this World Leaders Forum on the topic of children in the age of sustainable development. And I can tell you, it's hard to imagine a more wonderful gathering of leaders in the cause of children than we have today. You will see shortly an amazing display of leadership, sensitivity, and determination. I have a general theorem in this world that anything associated with Sweden is great. Sweden has a way of both charming us and inspiring us and directing us in good values and a good direction. So it's a special joy and great honor to have Your Majesty and Your Royal Highness with us today. Of course, this was put together by our own Swedish royalty, Johanna Rubinstein. Where are you? My colleague. Johanna is Assistant Director of the Earth Institute and our global ambassador and representative to the United Nations and all causes. And when you see the incredible amalgamation of expertise and heart and leadership here, this is Johanna's world and network, and we're really grateful for bringing us all together in this way. We're here at a very important, special time for the world. Obviously, it's a time of a lot of concern and anxiety for all of us because we're confronting many harrowing challenges and a lot of instability, a massive new epidemic in West Africa, spreading war. And so we're here with a lot of concern. But we're also here with hope, and with special hope made possible by the calendar that has put several crucial development objectives onto a track over the coming year, making 2015 a very special year. And in a way, that year of negotiation that we hope will bring to fruition many important initiatives that we'll discuss today started this week at the General Assembly. There are 3 major summits next year to set the so-called post-2015 agenda. And even before those 3, an extraordinarily important gathering that will help set the stage for our agenda and help to create that new development agenda. So next September, 1 year from today, the world is to adopt new sustainable development goals to guide us over the coming generation, to follow the Millennium Development Goal era with an even more holistic and a bolder agenda, building on the accomplishments to date. Before that, in July, will be a very important summit on financing for development that will be the underpinning for the Sustainable Development Goals. And in December of next year will be, unfortunately and fortunately, the last chance we have to keep the climate safe at the so-called COP21 conference on climate change in Paris, where our remaining hopes of staying below the 2 degrees Celsius warming can be realized if there's global boldness. So that is a remarkable agenda It's all about the future. It's all about children. It's all about the reason we are here today. And before those three summits is an amazing opportunity made possible by the government of Korea and UNESCO. And you'll hear more about this momentarily because we have the leader of UNESCO with us, a most remarkable leader. And that is a World Conference on Education next May, in which many of the issues that we talk about today, early childhood development, quality of education, universal access to education, health and education, and many other aspirations for a world in which every child has a chance can take hold. And we heard at the General Assembly this week President Park of Korea make a very, very strong pledge and commitment of Korea's leadership in that summit next spring and in all of these issues. So in this sense, we're meeting at a moment of tremendous possibility, and that makes it all the more remarkable that we have the leaders that we have here. Our intention is not only to reflect together, to brainstorm together, but also to conclude with a powerful declaration of a way forward, reflecting the remarkable group that we have assembled today. So without further ado, it is my absolute phenomenal joy and honor to introduce Your Majesty, Queen Sylvia. You greeted us recently at the Royal Palace in Stockholm, which was a thrill. It is a great thrill for me to be able to welcome you to Columbia's Palace on the middle of our campus, Low Library. This is where we gather for our highest occasions, and you, of course, represent the highest of the highest when we are able to welcome you here. So please, may I welcome you to the podium.
What a charming introduction. Thank you. Good morning, everybody, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, faculty and students. It is my great pleasure to be with you today in this beautiful library at Columbia University in the city of New York. I'm happy, I'm very proud to be part of this gathering and to have a chance to tell you how my family in various ways is working on contribution to a happier childhood for children in many parts of the world. 15 years ago, I established the World Childhood Foundation. Its work is based on the articles of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and focus on prevention of sexual abuse and exploitation of children. In 2010, His Majesty the King of Sweden and myself launched the Global Child Forum, a new platform to promote engagement of the private sector in children's causes. Today I have the privilege to be at this event that is co-convened by the Global Child Forum together with the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network and the Earth Institute of Columbia University. With me is one of my 3 children, Princess Madeleine, who now for some years has been working at the World Childhood Foundation and who recently launched a new campaign, the Thank You campaign, using social media to engage today's youth in children's causes and raising awareness about the work of childhood. It's fun. Just try. thankyou.org. And you can thank somebody for a happy childhood with a song. But how did it all start? It was on one of my trips to Brazil almost 20 years ago that I met a young boy in the favelas in Rio. He very proudly showed me his home, a box where he could barely fit to sleep and where he kept all of his belongings. The box was his comfort zone and his safe place. It was his little universe. As I left Brazil, I could not stop thinking of him. The rain was pouring down, and I was wondering what would happen to his home and if he would have to find a new, safe place. It was at this moment the idea of childhood was born. When I returned home, haunted by the picture of the little boy living alone in a paper box on the street, exposed to all possible risks, including the risk of sexual abuse and exploitation, I decided to start this foundation. I wanted to lend my voice to speak about children at risk and the importance of a healthy and happy childhood. I wanted to support development and implementation of programs aiming at preventing abuse of children or their rehabilitation. Today, childhood supports programs in 16 countries. In Brazil, I was lucky to be joined by my good friend Rosana Camargo, who started Childhood Brazil. Rosana is here today, and I want to thank her for her leadership in improving children's lives in Brazil. Childhood Brazil has pioneered and scaled up an innovative approach to protection of children. By working with 1,500 transportation companies, the foundation has trained the truck drivers to become protectors of children instead of perpetrators. It also led campaigns to prevent abuse of children at risk during the last World Cup. In the US, Childhood is supporting a number of projects, including teenage mothers and legal services for children. Other models and methods where Childhood has managed to lift the support to extraordinary heights are, for example, Half the Sky Foundation, who have established a method for children living in institutions in China. Children who now have a mother and are being loved and cared for. The model has been so successful that it has been adopted by the Chinese state. Or the Mama Plus program in Russia, which ensures that children born to HIV-positive mothers can stay within their biological family, go to school and daycare, and not to be stigmatized by society. A model so successful that it now exists also in the Ukraine, Vietnam, and Cambodia. Well, I'm a mother of 3 and a grandmother of 2 little granddaughters. And His Majesty and I, like most parents, love and deeply care about our children. But we also want to find ways to help other children and parents. And that's why I'm here. We have gathered this morning to discuss the future of the world's children and how we collectively can ensure and promote integration of children's rights, like access to nutrition, health, education, safety, love, and happiness in the new set of the Universal Global Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals. At the same time, more children than ever before are victims of violence, including sexual abuse, conflicts, forced migration, and climate change. We keep talking about preserving the planet for the future generations, forgetting about today's children. There are still millions of children who grow up in extreme poverty in war-torn conditions, in unstable environments, and are subjected to some of the worst forms of human rights violations imaginable. Instead of playing and learning, they are trafficked as prostitutes, as child soldiers, and as migrant farmers. Instead of feeling loved and nurtured, they are robbed of their childhoods and their dignity. These experiences not only shape the people they become when they grow up, but also shape the world that we all live in. His Majesty and our family created the Global Child Forum as a platform helping to raise awareness of the rights of the children, to engage the private sector, and to inspire more people to take action. Through the power of partnerships, we hope to create environments where children feel safe, secure, and respected, where they can grow to reach their full potential. Opportunities for dialogue, like the meeting today, help us look forward as a global community and explore how we see children fit within a broader sustainable development strategy. Investing in children and youth is necessary to build pluralistic and inclusive societies, which is the foundation for sustainable development. And there is no better time to do this than now, as we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. My hope is that we can work together to put children at the center of the Sustainable Development Agenda. Thank you very much.
Your Majesty, thank you very much, and be sure that we will do what we can to champion your cause and to work closely together with the Global Child Forum, which is the co-convener of today's meeting, together with the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. So we will absolutely be doing what we can to promote your wonderful work and your wonderful vision of making sure that children are at the center of the new Sustainable Development Agenda. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome our next speaker and participant, a great humanitarian leader, well known to many of you in many different ways for her humanitarian work and on the cover of many of your favorite magazines. This is a list I will never get on, the 50 most beautiful people in the world. That's absolutely true and beautiful, both in the sense of one of the world's leading supermodels and beautiful in the sense of all the work that you do. Let's welcome Alec Weck.
Wow, what an introduction. What do I say after that? Well, like my mother says, you know, she had 9 of us, so she definitely was the manager in that house. Get to the point. Well, I just would really like to say thank you so much, Columbia University, for having me in this platform and this amazing issue to be a part of. So, like Mother says, get to the point. Hello, everyone, and especially you students in the crowd. My name is Alec Weck, who don't know that, and I'm a model, Goodwill Ambassador for the UNHCR, which is United Nations High Commission for Refugees, and the ambassador for H&M Conscious Foundation. And I'm thrilled to be here to talk about education. I grew up in South Sudan before its independence. My father worked in Board of Education, so education was embedded in boys and girls in our family. But he emphasized, in particular, in girls' need of education. Because if you educate a girl, you'll educate a family, you'll educate a community and a society in general. The H&M Conscious Foundation was initiated by the founders of the Swedish company H&M, one of the largest fashion retailers since 2013. The person's family, founders, and majority owners of H&M have donated over $100 million, to be precise, $105 million of their private funding to the H&M Conscious Foundation. The mission of the foundation is to contribute to positive long-term change for people and communities, complementing H&M's sustainability work. The H&M Conscious Foundation put together an incredible advisory group consisting of people like Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Albert, Sir Richard Branson, and Professor Jeffrey Sachs, and myself, to identify what were the majority global challenges that the foundation could help to address. The foundation then used its website to ask both H&M employees and customers to decide which issues they wanted the foundation, to be engaged in. The issues they chose were strengthening women, clean water, and education. Today I'm here to talk about the global work H&M Conscious Foundation does in the education area to support early childhood development and education for the most vulnerable children in the world. I know firsthand about vulnerability. We were forced to flee our home to a refugee camp when I was just 9 years old. I've seen young girls pass away before 8th grade in childbirth when they're just kids, 12, 13, or 14. If they were in school, that would not be happening. In one word, if I wasn't educated to help guide me, I would never be standing here today telling my story. And that's the honest truth. H&M Conscious Foundation wants to contribute in giving the most vulnerable children the best possible start in life. Therefore, I've partnered with UNICEF and will contribute $9.3 million in a unique global flagship program for children, early education and development. Through the UNICEF Global Project, more than 73,000 children will benefit from a range of early childhood care and learning programs. 3 governments will help the developing national investment cases to highlight the importance of early childhood development. These cases will provide country-specific economic evidence for investment in ECD. And the first ever global report on early childhood development will be produced through the use of technology like an app. Will be providing real-time access to data. In addition of supporting UNICEF in its important work, the foundation will also support innovative projects at the ground level to spur the development of replicable and scalable models for children. I know this is the way to go. Growing up in South Sudan, in the Dinka tribe and the other tribes in the community, during the Civil War, I witnessed firsthand When you work in a community, instead of coming in and implementing other programs without community input, you will not succeed. When I visited the refugee camps in South Sudan a year ago, just a little after the independence took place, I saw so many children out of school and no school. Walking for 3 hours, just at the same age, like 8 or 9 years old, I was in South Sudan back in the late 80s, just to get to school, not to mention they have illnesses such as malaria and diarrhea. Results of drinking dirty water, contaminated water. I know education is the key, and together long-term positive change can come out. I am excited to tell you that later today, H&M Conscious Foundation will actually launch our first program not far from here, at a school in Harlem. It's a pilot project that will be going on for 3 years, and where we'll be working together with our friends at Earth Institute and Children's Health Fund. As a so-called celebrity model coming from South Sudan, now living in New York, I want to use my voice to advocate for children's rights to a first start in life, supporting universal access to early childhood development, and I'll continue committing to giving children a good start in life. As my father told me during that terrible civil war at home, you can lose nearly everything, but you can never lose your education and your knowledge. So thank you, and let's keep the positive conversation going. Thank you so much.
Alec, thank you so much for your leadership and also for giving us a hint of the wonderful announcements that will come later on in the program. We're very excited about the work that H&M Foundation will be partnering with us, and you'll meet Erwin Redlener and Karen Redlener, who are the wonderful heads of the Children's Health Fund, who are carrying out this phenomenal program. So we're really grateful. Now it's a very great privilege and pleasure to introduce our next speaker. I want to say in general that all of us in New York we're very proud New Yorkers, and we're very, very proud of our new mayor and his administration. We're also very proud of one of our great mayors. If Mayor Dinkins would just stand up for one moment. We're always in your hands, and it's so grateful to have you as a colleague also here at Columbia now, Mayor. When Mayor de Blasio ran for office last year, he described famously now the Dickensian vision of New York City as a tale of two cities, and a city that had become more and more divided by income and wealth and opportunity. And that message resonated strongly and brought the mayor to a great electoral victory. And he championed causes right at the center of our discussion, and indeed his flagship cause was that every child in this city should have the opportunity for pre-K education and for after school in middle school. And many people were skeptical. Many people said that can't be done, that's naive, and so forth. And Mayor de Blasio said something to me during the campaign, which I thought was very striking and important. He said, especially for us progressives, we have to show not only the vision, but we can really deliver. And so when it came to the question of delivery, Mayor de Blasio appointed a most remarkable deputy mayor who we have with us today, who he charged with actual delivery of this program. And that is Deputy Mayor Richard Berry, who brings remarkable energy and experience, a serial entrepreneur of not-for-profits all around children in many, many ways, and tremendous heart and experience to this cause. And I can tell you, we were there, Erwin and I were there from the first moment when Mayor de Blasio said, we're going to do it, getting these kids in school, and not just do it, but the first school year. And everybody remembers the headline when the school year opened this year, 51,000 kids in UPK from a fresh start at the beginning of the year. And Deputy Mayor, that is a great accomplishment of you and Mayor de Blasio. We're really thrilled and we're really honored to have you with us today. Please come up.
Good morning. Good morning. Well, first of all, thank you, Jeff, for that lovely introduction. Undeserved, but I'll take it. Hopefully somebody's recording for my mother later. I want to thank Jeff and also Erwin Redlener of the Children's Health Fund for your invitation to speak here today, and all of our distinguished guests. First of all, I want to say to Your Majesty, Queen Sylvia, those remarks were deeply inspiring and challenging for all of us. So thank you for those remarks. And also to Alec Weck, who I've seen many times, but normally just me looking at you. I want to thank you for your deeply inspiring personal story, a real powerful testament to the importance of education. I have to say I've never shared a stage with a queen and a supermodel. But if I was going to do it, I cannot think of a greater queen and a greater supermodel to do it with. So thank you all for being here. And I also want to acknowledge again one of my personal heroes, I think one of the greatest leaders this city has ever had, Mayor David Dinkins. So thank you. And to all of you who've traveled here from out of the city, from out of the country, allow me on behalf of my boss, Mayor Bill de Blasio, to say welcome to New York. I hope you have a wonderful time here. Spend your money in our hotels and restaurants, of course. And thank you all for being here. So I want to speak to you briefly, as we discussed, about the work that New York City is doing to advance the ideals that we are here to discuss today. We all know that America is built on a simple yet powerful idea. This is the idea that where you end up in life should not be determined by where you begin life. We call this idea the American dream, and it is in many ways the founding idea of our country. Now, we know that in America it has never been true, of course. It has always mattered to some extent where you've come from, the nationality of your parents, your skin color, your gender, your parents' education. Of course, these things have always mattered in America. But in many ways, the history of our country is the story of those things mattering less and less, year after year, generation after generation. You could describe American history as a story of American reality approaching the American dream. But as you've also heard, and as you all know, we live in difficult times. Here in America, as income inequality increases and as social mobility decreases, this is perhaps the first time in American history where you can say that we are in fact moving in the wrong direction, that the gap between the American dream and the American reality is widening, not decreasing. The amount of a child's income that will be determined by their parents' income, the likelihood that a poor child will grow up to be a poor adult and to have poor children. These are not just these are not just sort of socioeconomic problems. These ideas, these realities, they challenge the very fabric of our nation. As Jeff said, when Mayor de Blasio ran for office, he talked about the tale of two cities. And for me, it is a story that resonates personally. I grew up in one of those New York cities, in East New York, Brooklyn, which is a low-income community on the border of Queens, but was very lucky to attend high school at Stuyvesant, one of the finest public high schools in the country. And so growing up, I had a very real day-to-day experience of traveling on the 3 train over an hour from one New York City to the other New York City. One New York City where children lacked opportunity, where schools were failing, where the very air we breathed was different. Traveling to this other New York City, where not only were children expected to succeed, but where children had the opportunity to succeed. So the question for us is, how do we change course? I know it starts by refusing to accept that the current path is the only way forward. Here in New York City, under the leadership of our mayor, we have decided that the American dream cannot only be a myth. We have decided that the American dream is instead a blueprint. We are committed to giving our children, all of our children, the opportunity to live their dreams, to live their best lives. Over the past 9 months, I'm proud to say that we in New York City have been proving that government can make opportunity real. The key, of course, is leadership, and why it's so important to have so many of the amazing, important people in this room here. Early in this campaign, as you heard, the mayor made an audacious promise. He promised that every 4-year-old in New York City would have access to free, full-day, high-quality pre-kindergarten education within 2 years. And that every middle school student in New York City would have access to free, high-quality after-school education. The pundits, the political class, and the press all dismissed this idea. He was called famously not serious. It was said that these ideas were non-starters. And yet, here we are. As Jeff said, this April, well, he didn't say this, but this April, after a spirited public debate, I will call it, we were able to secure $300 million a year in funding, example, for pre-kindergarten. And from that April to today, we went from a system serving 20,000 children in full-day pre-kindergarten to well over 50,000 children in full-day pre-kindergarten. We've hired and trained over 1,000 new teachers. We've inspected nearly 2,000 schools and community center. We built a tremendous apparatus to go out into the community to find families with 4-year-olds and to help them find a center or a pre-kindergarten program that is right for them. And we are not done. Next year, our plan is to go from that 53,000 to over 70,000 children in this program to make sure that every 4-year-old has access to this important platform on the path to a lifelong learning. And again, it all starts with leadership. We have a mayor who realizes that in spite of the challenges and hard work it takes to make a goal like this a reality, pre-K for all truly is a win-win for children, families, and the city's future. Study after study shows that high-quality pre-kindergarten can significantly impact a child's chances of both short-term and long-term success. But the benefits are not only educational for those children, they're economic benefits for the family for the family as well. Over the course of a 180-day school year, a family would save more on childcare than the cost of a semester's tuition at the City University of New York. The city's Department of Education also expects to see cost savings of up to $60 million by the time this cohort graduates high school. And these savings will be generated by things such as reduced special education costs, fewer students repeating grades, lower teacher turnover and absenteeism, and reduced spending on security, health, and mental health services. But of course, as I said before, it's not just about education even, it's certainly not just about dollars and cents. It is about having a fundamentally different relationship with our children and our families. It is about making a promise that indeed, in New York, where you start life will not determine where you end life. Another example of where we're making opportunity happen for our children is the vast expansion of after-school programs for middle school students. We know that middle school is a difficult time for children, and it is crucial that we give them all a chance to discover what makes them tick, to get them excited about their learning and how to express themselves. We are investing over $140 million this year to create 40,000 new middle school seats in after-school programs. And next year we'll be investing $190 million to serve 50,000 new students. That'll be over 100,000 middle school students who have free, high-quality after-school programs in New York City. Again, it's hard to overstate the importance of this. For one thing, of course, after school extends the educational day. More hours means more opportunities to learn. But it's especially important for those children who are struggling in school, who maybe don't feel comfortable in the classroom studying math and English, who maybe have never had a chance to experience the true joy of learning, to know what it feels like to master something. By exposing children to arts, music, and drama, you might find that spark that ignites that children's love of learning. These are just two of the many initiatives we're working on. I know that later you're going to hear from Erwin and Karen about this amazing initiative with H&M in Harlem. This is reflective of another initiative of the mayor's, community schools. Our administration has committed itself to developing 100 new community schools before the end of the term. And for those of you who don't know what a community school is, it is the idea that children who come to school hungry, who come to school depressed, who come to school unable to see the blackboard because they lack vision care, or who are constantly missing school because of health issues or because of unstable housing because they're moving around a lot, that those children will never be able to learn if they don't have the opportunity to come to school ready to learn. And so in our community schools, we connect schools with the resources that are designed to meet those children's needs. I could go on, but the point I want to make to you is that change is truly possible. It's possible when you make your priorities clear. It's possible when you make those priorities about children. And it's possible when you really, truly weave the apparatus of government together on behalf of children. When you do that, your campaign promises become your governing priorities. And suddenly, naysayers go from, "You'll never be able to do that," to saying, "How did you do that?" And when you succeed, the bar is raised, and there is a new status quo. We are on our way to establishing a new status quo for our young people in the city, and along the way, with partners like you, we hope to provide an example for other cities around the country and around the globe. Thank you so much.
Richard, thank you, and please thank the mayor for all the wonderful work that you're doing, and be assured that we're standing with you and eager to help in every way that we can. We are so blessed with the leaders in this room that I'm going to add one to our program, if I could briefly, because we're very lucky to have a leader of the Millennium Development Goal era who has shown what can be accomplished. We have two actually coming up, so, but one who has shown what can be accomplished in a record-breaking pace and depth on behalf of children, and that is the very esteemed and world-recognized Minister of Health of Rwanda, who's here with us. I'm going to ask you out of the program, Minister Agnes Binawahu, who is also professor of health, has been at Harvard and Dartmouth, and is a recognized leader in public health. But under her leadership, Rwanda has had one of the fastest, perhaps the fastest ever decline of child mortality rates. And this is a remarkable accomplishment, and we're so happy that you're here. I wonder if I could ask you to say a few words on how you did it and how you can inspire others to do it as well. Agnes.
Your Majesty and everybody here, good morning. So how we did it, it was just a matter of goodwill. We all know what we have to do. We all know what works, Your Majesty. It's just a matter to decide we are going to do it. Just do it. I don't want to say who said it, but we just did it. So, first of all, we have to agree that children is our future. In Africa, in Asia, is the majority of our people. And even now, with what we did it with great solidarity. We have Gavi here, I love them. We have the children vaccinated for 10 vaccines and girls for 11, fully. The last one was rotavirus introduced, before it was HPV. 90% of our kids are vaccinated fully for 11 vaccines, for girls 10, for boys. So we have universal coverage of bed nets. The first killer was malaria. We doesn't have to forget that. PMTCT, this university have done great for that. We have universal coverage for PMTCT. And our rate of transmission, the two last year, was less than 2%. Meaning poverty is not a fatality. Meaning do the maximum with each and every opportunity you have. Make it work together, find the good partners, think step by step what are the bottlenecks and break them. Be bottleneck breakers and you'll reach your way. And now we are tackling early child development. And I'm a pediatrician, I'm a neonatologist, so I really want, under the leadership of our First Lady, she's our champion in that, we put everything under 5 in early child development. Pregnancy, when the woman discovers it, she enters in early child development program. The 4 antenatal clinic, early child development. Safe delivery, early child development. The 28 days that are so fragile, where we lose the maximum of baby, we put that in early child development. The 42 days, the long neonatal period, early child development. Now we bring the father, the community around that child. We are sure that we are going to reach the next frontier of family cohesion, of community cohesion, on good governance to create a governance that is child-friendly at local level, where people are living. So this is our program. We try always to be ahead of the game and to do good for the most vulnerable of our society. I thank our partners because we never do that alone. And I thank the academic world who teach us a lot how to do that with rigor, how to do that with persistency, and never forget, everything is about political will. Money is not the big obstacle. It's what you do with money that matters. Better you have $1, use it with purpose, than 1 million spoiled. Thank you very much for the children of the world.
Okay, you've heard it. Be bottleneck breakers and just do it. It's amazing what can be accomplished. And we have another world-leading just do it leader with us, a wonderful, remarkable leader who's carrying on her shoulders right now a huge amount of the task of getting us through 2015 with a coherent, consistent, bold agenda. And she's doing it beautifully. When we do have our 10 Sustainable Development Goals next year, we'll remember what Amina Mohammed, our next speaker, has brought We know her as a leader for many causes and many efforts over the years. She has been a pioneer in expanding education to children in need in many different contexts. When Nigeria had the opportunity to invest its funds from the savings on debt relief, Amina Mohammed was entrusted by the president with organizing that effort, and she did it absolutely brilliantly and created, in a country of enormous complexity, programs that enabled money at the center to reach right down to the local communities. And so when Secretary General Ban Ki-moon faced these three big agendas coming up in 2015, it was natural that he turned to Amina Mohammed as Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations as the coordinator of the 2015 agenda. We thank you for your leadership. I told her we've been watching her speak all week in countless forms. She's doing an absolutely brilliant job and inspiring the world to a coherent and bold agenda next year. Amina.
Wow, okay. This is really setting me up for tall ambition. Her Majesty, so graceful and committed to service. I think this is a brilliant way of us showing that when we have the possibilities, what we can do with them, and we thank you for that. Excellencies, many colleagues and friends here, and I'd like to say especially the young people here. I had the privilege 2 years ago of just teaching a small number of you when we talked about policy to practice, what it is to say it and then how we do it. And that was a considerable honor for me, because I was really hearing from young people what their expectations were, their understanding. And when I think about the post-2015, this is about us giving you the baton. You'll be carrying the burden. You'll be running with it. It's your vision and your energy that we need for post-2015. So thank you for making the time to join us here. Of course, thank you, the Global Child Forum, and EI, especially Jeff and my sister Joanna. Thank you very much for making sure that I'm here across town in a crazy GA week. We are actually on the cusp of something quite incredible and transformational. We've been speaking in UN Speak for so long that I think we're almost forgetting about the opportunity of post-2015, that we will move from just talking about north to south on halving poverty or by percentages or by numbers, to a sustainable development agenda that says we're going to eradicate it in the next 15 years. That's quite incredible if we really do put all the efforts behind it and mean what we say. The promises we make, we deliver on. That's one transformation, that for a universal agenda, no one will be left behind, and we have the means to do it. The second is we're not going to talk about little pots of money or percentages of a whole. We're actually going to look at the whole and see how we can unlock the resources we know we have in this world to make good on an agenda that's not charity. It's what we need to respond to the huge challenges and the complexities that we have in the world today. So unlocking resources will be the next transformation in the way in which governments and the world does business. The last and not least, and we've seen people march to it this week, the largest march ever in New York, is about climate change. And finally, we've gone past all the skepticism and all the naysayers to understand and realize that this is a very big reality, and without which we can't do anything if we don't have that ambitious agreement that we sign on to at the end of 2015. All of this, of course, in the outside world is one and the same thing. It's only in the corridors of the UN that we cross T's and dot I's. So the transformation will be to get those cross T's and dot I's to mean something real in the life of people. As we come to speak about children, I'm a Nigerian mother of 6 children. And in the context of being an African woman, and Agnes will tell us this, the children in your street, the children in your community, the children in the society are actually yours. We don't see them differently. When someone says they've lost a child down the road, it's your loss, it's very personal. And so for us, children are about our future. Something's gone very wrong. Over the years, something has gone very wrong because we're losing that as we look at the indices around the world, particularly in my continent, of what has happened to children. While I speak about that, when the world talks to what's happened to the girls of Chibok, and this is personal to me because it's a region I come from. These are girls who went to school a couple of hours away when I went to primary school. What really went wrong? Because I had an education, I'm standing up before you in the United Nations, Assistant Secretary General. What happened? What chance, what investments did we stop making in our children, in our young people, that at 14, 15, 16, one day they become spoils of war? We have to ask that question. It's not long ago. I'm still here, and I can tell you I'm still under 60. So it wasn't long ago that this happened. And we really need to think that when we're talking about our agenda. I struggle every single day. I went home for summer, and people ask me, did you have a nice summer vacation? Of course I did. I went home to my children and my community. But I went home to a country that we're faced with terrorism, and we were faced with Ebola. So I struggle every day to find a reason to come back to New York to continue to help shape the next development agenda. And what's the reason I should come back? Because like Agnes, I would love to be at home doing the things that we need to do, just doing them. And sometimes it's a struggle when we speak with 193, 197 countries to find a reason to get that ambitious agenda that everyone says, as the Deputy Mayor, it's impossible. And I think that this is really, for me, an important thing. Why do I come back? Well, we have a Swedish Deputy Secretary General. And what he tells us is that his years of experience in the United Nations, we are in a world of what it should be and a world as it is. And our job is try to bring the two closer together. How can we close that gap? And that's exactly why I come back and why we spent the last 18 months trying to have a bold and ambitious agenda that includes everyone. That we've managed to help member states come to a conclusion of very many goals and targets, but have the key elements of what is ambition and transformative. There's nothing in what the countries that have presented with 2 weeks ago presented that. There's nothing lacking. Even in the finance framework, they're saying everything that's right. But how do we turn it into a reality? How do we make that a promise that we don't keep in the drawer, that we deliver to people and that we make a real difference in people's lives? Well, I can say that we've got a good start. We have that ambitious set because we've remembered that the MDGs with 460 odd days to go is unfinished business. It's also many, many lessons learned about what works, and we can see Gavi here, great partner, what we've done on immunization and saving children's lives. But as I said just earlier, it wasn't just about the health, it's the knowledge of those systems and the strategies that they use to reach our children that are being used in other sectors. So we learned many, many things with the MDGs, and we hope that we carry those forward to make the next ambition very real, that we have this foundation that we can sit on. But I want us to underscore just what Agnes has just said. It's not just about the money. I had $1 billion a year to spend on doing something with the MDGs. And I have a difficult country. We had many governance challenges. I thought that was the big one. So I was trying to protect this money, and nobody should steal it because it's for poor people. And what happened to me? I spent a year protecting money and not just doing it. And what did that mean? That meant that people, I couldn't explain to Nigerians why I still had $1 billion in the bank account and they hadn't had it affected in their lives. But this was about governance. It was about systems, capacities to do the job, the skill sets that you really needed to plan and to get that money to the local level. And so it's the partnerships that we had with Jeff and his team here in EI that helped make that happen, but investments in our own people, in our own sectors too, that made it happen. Good news is that there are many things that we've learned from. Ebola today is not such a problem in Nigeria because we learned from what the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation did in helping us with polio and putting strategies around that we could then help mitigate what we've got right now. So we do have to get it right. Over the next year, we've got a really big challenge of trying to make this real. We need your voices. As we've heard here, we do know what to do. We have the best practice. We've been Petri dishes in a laboratory for long enough. Right now it's about scale, it's about everyone, it's about leaving no one behind. It's about getting the data right and making that an absolute right that we have baseline. It's about partnerships, building on the ones that have worked to see how we can go to scale and make it happen. It's about actually thinking about how we can reach for the moon. Because only when we have that ambition do we know that even if we fall to the stars, that's okay, but nothing less for the people of the world today, because there are so many in need. We're in a very luxurious little part of New York in the world, but out there, people need us to stand up and be counted, and that's what the United Nations intends to do. That's the leadership of the Secretary General, which will take what he has. He will lead, he will be ambitious, he will do what is right for people and planet. And for that, I thank you for the opportunity of us just reinforcing the message that we can do it. Thank you.
See, this is like a baseball team where every batter comes up and hits a home run. It's really remarkable, and we have another home run hitter that I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce, another world leader who is at the center of this agenda and is carrying it with tremendous energy and inspiration. Irina Bokova is the Director General of UNESCO, and of course UNESCO is our world-leading organization on education, science, and culture. And Irina comes to that challenge with wonderful experience and knowledge as in many capacities, including Foreign Minister of Bulgaria and a key architect of European integration. And from there, she has become Director General of UNESCO and energized UNESCO, putting it into the forefront of many of the greatest challenges in the world, of course, including education, including finding the ways to mutual respect across cultures, safety of journalism, and in a wonderful initiative that I'm so pleased to be part of, bringing broadband and all of the possibilities of information technology to the cause of development in a remarkable initiative called the Broadband Commission. So we are really grateful, Irina, that you're here and honoring us, but we're especially grateful for all your leadership. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for your very kind presentation. And let me first turn to Your Majesty to say how important this forum is. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for this initiative. Thank you to your family. Because I do believe that nowadays children embody everything that we at UNESCO and the United Nations we want to achieve when we speak about sustainable development. I'm very grateful to the Columbia University, to Earth Institute, to Jeff, to Joanna, good friends and partners, all the students and faculty staff being here, the Deputy Mayor of New York. When I was listening to him, I remember a personal story. When I spent 25 years ago in the University of Maryland, I had to change my New York driver's license to the Maryland driver's license. I went there, and the officer looked at my New York driver's license and said, "Oh, young lady," it was 25 years ago, he said, "Oh, young lady, if you can do it in New York, you can do it anywhere." So I think if New York can do it indeed, it's a wonderful also inspiration for all of us to do it. And what the Minister of Health of Rwanda, another telling example of how we can do it when we have a political will, the right resources, and put the right resources into work, it can be done. And I think what we're here gathered today is to see indeed how we can do it. And this is all the effort that we are making at UNESCO, wider at the United Nations, what my wonderful friend Amina Mohamed just explained, all the effort of the Secretary General and of the United Nations to do the unfinished business of the Millennium Development Goals and to move forward to something which is universal, long-term, with the very concrete objectives and the very concrete targets. And I think one of the most important is to end by 2030 the extreme poverty in the world and to move the world into a different human-centered development. And I think what we're doing now is exactly this. And I think children are embodying this human-centered target and objective that we want to do. I was recently, and I turn to Alec because I recently visited South Sudan with another champion humanist, I would say, Forrest Whitaker, the special envoy of UNESCO for children in conflict, and Leila Zeregui, the special representative of the Secretary General for Children in Conflict. We visited camps of the internally displaced person, and I think I better understand now, Alec, what you were talking about when you said that South Sudan, which is a country with a huge, I would say, problems, and also to some extent embodies the ability of the United Nations, of the international community, to accompany a country getting out of poverty, an independent country, and move forward with a lot of challenges of multicultural, multi-ethnic society, with children soldiers, with internally displaced persons. And I think I do understand much better what you are saying, and I like to appreciate your advocacy and your role in the world. And we are here to talk about, I wish I was listening, I wish all the delegations were here today, because this is precisely what is the debate in the United Nations General Assembly. This is precisely what we want to achieve when we talk about Sustainable Development Goals. We want to do education, a inclusive, quality education, a lifelong learning experience for all. We want this to be the guiding principle of human development for the future, to unleash the potential of human ingenuity, what the Deputy Mayor was saying, because education is probably the most powerful instrument of social mobility, so that if you are born a poor child in a distant rural community, or if you are born a girl, you are not destined, as Nelson Mandela was saying in his Nobel Prize, when he received the Nobel Prize speech, he said, poverty is not a destiny. You can get out of poverty, and you should not be there when you were born. You have to have a chance, an opportunity to move. And this is where I believe the interlinkages between the development goals stand. And once again, I turn to the issues of children. It is about giving the right and chance, a right education and the chance to children to learn, to be educated. You have to link it with health also. This is where our global monitoring report this year stands, to put the education within the broader framework of other development goals, of health, of water, clean water and sanitation, of poverty eradication, and all the other related debates. And let me just probably say a few words more about early childhood care and education, what Your Majesty also were mentioning. I would like to remind that this is the first goal, one of the goals of the Millennium Development Goal, when we adopted in Dakar the 6th in the year 2000 at the major conference, the Education for All Millennium Development Goal, then translated, adopted by the United Nations. Early childhood care and education was among those, because more and more evidence we have nowadays that it is critical for the future development of a human being. And we did a global monitoring report in 2005. We made a major conference, World Conference in 2010 on early childhood care and education. Many countries already have adopted policies. It's important to have this embedded into national policies. It is not just one development project, as the Minister of Health of Rwanda was saying. We have to make systems, systems that are sustainable, systems that work. And now we have in the world already, in the developing countries, 30 countries which have such systems, but only 18% of African countries have it. We have to do more so that this critical period is very much embedded in what we want to do. And then, of course, when we draft and we craft our future sustainable development goals, we need to invest in these systems. We need to heavily invest in education, in learning. And it is not just international aid, it's mobilizing national, local resources. There are wonderful examples of having more budgets, of having linkages between the two of us in the United Nations working ever better in order to make this happen. And I think we are on a good track. I think we have to look at the good examples also. It can be done indeed, and Rwanda is one of those examples. Many countries have introduced compulsory free education. Enrollment has doubled in these countries. They have taken other measures, combining nutrition and education in schooling, supporting local communities, working also with local religious community leaders, putting the girl child in the focus of some of these development efforts. And recently we had a conference, and it was very interesting because we all agreed around the vision of sustainability. And I think sometimes that the face of a sustainability effort should be a 10-year-old girl in some developing country, in a rural community. A 10-year-old girl who attends school, who is not given to marriage, who is not pregnant, who is not giving birth at the age of 11, 12, 13, who continues to go into school. Then she moves into the secondary school. She has a future. She has also a vision about contributing to her family, to her community. We have to target this 10-year-old girl. How to support her, I think, embodies also all the efforts that we are here gathered today. And I would like to thank, of course, once again, Your Majesty, to thank Sweden, because Sweden is a wonderful partner and an example of such vision of sustainable development, and all of you for coming and sharing this understanding. And of course, Columbia University, the Earth Institute, a wonderful partner of us, of UNESCO, of the United Nations, so close to this vision, humanistic, I would say, vision of human development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irina. This was really inspiring. Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, friends, and students. I'm Joanna Rubinstein, and you already heard about me, so I don't intend to use more of our time, and would really like to introduce our first continuing panel of world leaders who really fight for children's rights by doing things. So if I may start by asking Seth Berkley to come up, and Stine Bosse, Ambassador Do, Yang Shim, Marta Santos Pais, and our hero Yoshikawa. Thank you so much for being with us here today, and so far it has been really a call to action, very inspiring, but as we heard, we also have to do things, and many of you are very much engaged in doing things. I would like to start to ask Seth, who is one of the doers and has been a doer for many, many years, initially working at Rockefeller Foundation, thinking about how to develop public-private partnerships, and then ending up leading one, which was developing vaccines against HIV. From there, he went on to take over a major global challenge: how do we immunize all the kids in the world? So what I would like us to think about here is what would be the core priorities within our own different fields when it comes to the next set of global goals and when it comes to sustainable development agenda.
So thank you, Joanna, and it's a great honor to be here with so many wonderful leaders. You know, we've done extraordinary things in this MDG period, and one of the things I want to say is it's absolutely critical that we were able to measure what we did, and that's an important point. So, you know, if you look at MDG 4, which is child mortality, we've gone from 12.7 million deaths a year to 6.3 in 2013. That's still 6.3 too many. But if you actually adjust for population, it actually went from what would have been 17 million deaths a year, given the population growth, to 6.3. So we're not on target to meet that MDG, but we've done a lot, and the challenge is how do we accelerate? But you know, what you're asking me to talk about is not so much that MDG 4, but actually MDG 8, which people don't talk so much about, which is how do we create a new sustainable partnership? And for us, the way we are contributing to moving forward, and Agnes, I think, talked well about this in Rwanda, is we work with countries to try to have them take a lead in getting vaccines out to their children. They actually pay for those vaccines. There's no free lunch here. They pay, if they're a very poor country, they pay a little bit. As they get wealthier, they pay more until eventually they graduate. So countries have a critical role to play, and we work with them to strengthen health systems. Like in the Ebola countries, we invested $53 million in those health systems. Not enough to have a resilient and sustainable system, but we all have to come together to try to build those systems. But the other thing we do is we work with the private sector, and these are the new parts of the partnership. So we work with pharmaceutical companies to bring prices of vaccines down. That's important for donor resources, but it's also important to make it sustainable for countries. We work with the private sector on, floating bonds to use innovative finance. We work with the private sector to help improve supply chains and leapfrog with technology. So that's an important part. But lastly, it's an extraordinary in these new partnerships. Our overhead rate is 2.47%. 2.47%. Why is that? Because we work with others. We work with WHO, we work with UNICEF, we work with the World Bank. We don't duplicate. We come together, all of us working together to deliver on this. So for me, whatever the number is in the next set of SDGs, there need to be a relatively small number. I think Her Majesty said this right, children need to be at the center of this. And what's critical is that they are measurable. And let me just finish with one point. We think vaccines are the great success, and it's true. It reaches more children than any other intervention in the world. And the tracer vaccine we use is DPT-3, which is about 83% coverage. So you think 4 out of 5 kids are getting it, we have to worry about the 1 out of 5, and that's true. But if you ask the question, how many children get the 11 vaccines that Agnes talked about, the answer is actually 5%. 5% of the world's kids get the 11 vaccines that WHO has recommended. They're way ahead of the curve. So our role in this next period is to make sure that every child can live to its full potential and is able to live a healthy life and be able to go to school and be able to contribute, et cetera.
So would you say that one of your targets in the next set of goals would be to really not just have every child immunized, but also expand the number of existing vaccines to reach more children?
I mean, for me, the critical issue here is it's about equity. And it's interesting, you go to many poor countries, they don't yet have the vaccines, and you say to the leaders, are your children vaccinated against these 11? And they all raise their hands. Of course they are, because they have resources, they bring them in. It's about giving the science and technology. We have vaccines against the largest killers of children. We have vaccines against cancers, the largest cancer killer of women. We have these vaccines. Why are we not getting them to every person to make an opportunity for them to live to their full potential? That's the challenge.
Well, thank you, Seth. Stina Bosse, you used to be a big CEO. You come from the private sector. You are definitely an action person, and delivery, that's what matters. And you are trying to bring that to the NGO sector. Sure. You are also a Millennium Development Goals advocate of the Secretary General, and you have broad experience working on projects in developing countries with organizations like Child Fund Alliance right now, of which you are a vice chair. The organization is really trying to see how to standardize the work, how to make those organizations and programs accountable. What do you see as opportunities and challenges, perhaps, as well, with the new Sustainable Development Goals agenda?
I think, first of all, it's obvious what was also just mentioned, namely that the fact that we can actually measure what we're doing is crucial. And for the next goals, hopefully that will be the case as well. More and more NGOs have actually taken on the Millennium Goals to measure themselves against exactly that. And I think that is very, very important and partly what should be a success factor. And then, of course, I think for everybody to think about sustainability and sustainability in development
and skipping the children. It's just completely illogic. So having a main focus, exactly from a sustainability point of view, on the children going forward is for me very crucial and should be obvious. And then of course there is a factor in there that if there's anything that we can all claim to have an experience about, it's being a child. We all know how that was, good and bad. So some of these areas to me are very logical also going forward. I think the MDG goals have done a lot of good. And mainly, it's actually made it obvious for all of us that this huge mountain that looked very, very difficult to climb up was actually achievable, that we could do it. And of course, it puts even more focus on what are the new goals, because now we can see for us that we can do it. This has a positive and it has a negative, because it becomes more and more crucial that we choose the right goals. And of course, I think that when we're talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, the factor of quality in education becomes spot on. I mean, working in West Africa, where I have my sort of operational development work, it's so obvious. We've got many children now at primary school, close to all children, but the quality of the education that we there bring to the children is a debate and should be debated. So there we need to do a lot more. Then I think another area that we should really keep focusing on, also going forward, is of course the gender issue and gender equality issues. We now know as a fact, and we should stop debating whether it's right or wrong, we now know as a fact that when we spend $1 in giving a young woman or a woman her own income, that actually floats directly into the family and the society, and it is well spent, and society rises. So we must not forget that. And then finally, also onto your point, equality. We must also talk about equality, because equality matters. It does make a huge difference for development in the society that we actually also talk about equality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stina. I think that wearing your hat before as a business person and switching to work with people who want to do good but not necessarily have the right training and skills in terms of how do you execute those projects, your contributions advising these organizations is really critical. Do you think sometimes a little bit more about those public-private partnerships, that this is one of the roles where the private sector could be more helpful, where they usually are not engaged?
Yes, I think there is a, as it was very well said from the Minister of Development from Rwanda, yes, there is a lot to do about organizations and how do you organize this work. But I would also say that there is a lot to be learned the other way around. So partnerships in this area is both ways, because there's a lot of the passion and the engagement and the talking about just humanity, being a human being on the same planet, that businesses could learn from. So a partnership, in my opinion, goes both ways. There is learning from business to the NGO world and organizing all these areas, but there's also learning points the other way.
Thank you so much. Ambassador Doe, I had the privilege of traveling with you and interacting on different levels. I've met you at the meetings on sustainable tourism, where I didn't really understand what has sustainable development to do with tourism, but I learned a lot. And I think now, that was several years ago, nowadays we all understand how important it is. You are also MDG advocate of the Secretary General of the United Nations, and you also run a foundation and supports literacy among children by building small libraries in villages across Africa, and if I remember correctly, you should have more than 160 by now. You come from a country where you reminded us yesterday at the meeting with Secretary General and the MDG advocates that Korea was one of the poorest countries. And you remember even from your childhood how difficult the life was, and that Korea was not fortunate to have natural resources, but it was by determination and collective effort of the nation to educate its children and thereby also get the technology sector to thrive and the country to thrive, you could overcome all those challenges. How do you see now the role of education when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals? And what can we learn from Korea's example?
Thank you, Joanna. Korea perhaps is the only example on earth, I have to say, that we started $69 per capita income. Not 169, it was 69, two-digit. And I was born into that country, and my daughter doesn't like me saying how old I am. I'm 65. And that's how we started. And Korea has enormous challenges, climate challenges, war challenges. We had everything on our plate. And did we have natural resources? No, we don't even one oil of gas, one ounce of oil coming from our territory. But now, I think we are about $25,000 per capita income. You will be if you go your house, you will see a lot of Samsung, LG, and Hyundai, and a lot of people think they're Japanese made. No, they're not. They're Korean made. That's how fast we come about. There's two things. One, education. You know, today we heard wonderful speeches, importance of education. Yes, we're the Koreans, we practiced it. And second, political will. Leader, we had the right leader at the right time. And leaders, I mean, from the president to mother or sister. They were leaders for nurturing their children and their brothers and sisters. Let's go to school. Let's study. That's how made Korea. So if anybody wants to know about importance of education, just come to Korea. And I'm sure if you talk to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, he will go on and on and on, talk about 24 hours, because he walked 10 kilometers a day to go to school, and so did we. Your Highness, you talked about how you were engaged this foundation. I had my little own experience. Yes, I was United Nations World Tourism Organization and Sustainable Tourism for Elimination of Poverty. I traveled Africa very often. And when I landed Africa, it was like me landing 50 years ago of my country. It was like me taking time machine and go back. And I knew if we could do it, they could do it. There's no excuse why they cannot do it. So to make my story short, I've just organized. I don't build hardwares. I'm not good at building hardwares. We set up Thank You Sumo libraries. We did it 153 in 20 different countries. But here's the thing. Like, this is something Secretary General Ban and we worry. Like our generation, we know what the poverty is. Our generation, we know how to fight poverty. But I look at my Korean younger generation, they don't know because they were born into already affluent society. And when I travel with them, with my young staff, they say, look at Master, look at that. And they think it's strange. And I tell them, look, that's the way I lived. So I think we need to somehow get young generation of developed countries engaged into this and telling them, look, it's not isolated society world anymore. If you have Ebola, in Guinea or Sierra Leone, you will get that in your home a week later. And they're so interchangeable with society. We have to teach them somehow that they will share and they will carry the torch of saying, we did it, my parents did it, you can do it too. So I think this is very, very important that we have some interchange and interaction. So I love to take volunteers from Korea to Africa, and 9 out of 10, they come back just like same passion that I felt when I first landed in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you for these inspiring remarks. I would like to turn actually to Hiro, and who is a professor at NYU, but who is also a co-chair of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network's thematic group on education, and has been very much engaged in making sure that the early childhood development or education goal got into at least the first proposed 10 goals that the Sustainable Development Solutions Network released a year ago in its report. Right now, we realize that there is a lot of momentum and more voices, and we heard it really from all the leaders today, how important the early childhood development is. As a scientist, an academic, how do you see, how can we translate what we know on early childhood development into policy, and what do you see as really the most important issues that need to be in the next agenda?
Sure. It's certainly an honor to be here and to have worked with the Sustainable Development Solutions Network to bring together the science of child and youth development, which I think informs our report. I think it's, as you said, a very promising time for the field of early childhood development, and I think the opportunity, even in the current language, is to integrate the issues of survival with learning and developmental potential, and that is what I think is one of the most exciting things. We all have to make sure this language stays in there. I think many people, actually everybody in this room, I'm sure, played some of the role over the last year in making sure that early childhood education, but also early childhood development programs and policies more broadly, supplemented, I think, the extremely valuable and world-changing work around mortality issues and vaccinations and those kinds of things. So that's the next challenge. I think what happened was there's a growing recognition that there's a single science. It's a single human science of child and youth development that is informing this work. It cuts across, of course, the neuroscience, emerging information and data that we now know about how sensitive the brain is in early childhood, but also, I would say, in adolescence. There is another spurt of brain growth and sensitivity to environments around the time of puberty, and I think that's a clear link in New York City's investments in early childhood education and then after school in adolescence. We have to think about these issues of early adolescent parenthood and what that often does to interrupted educations. The economics of investment in children, I think we have much stronger evidence than we did 15 years ago. So regardless of whether we're talking about the North American or rich country studies or in low and middle income countries, the benefit cost ratios for quality pre-primary education and for quality parenting programs are quite enormous. They are between 6 and 10 in any country context. If you implement quality parenting programs, quality pre-primary education. But I think the next challenge is that we bring the science of evaluation, implementation, and data systems to bear so that we're not simply working with the basic science, as important as it is, of neuroscience and the biological sciences, but we actually have to harness that science. There does need to be a data revolution in the child area. We need to kind of synthesize that science, and ultimately the SDGs will not have a guide to children. I think we need to bring that together. The different targets that are relevant to children and youth need to be brought together and linked to the guiding principles for implementation, governance, and finance. And that's why I think we need a new level of coordination between the private sector and the public sector, across health, across education, poverty reduction, and child protection. We have to address the fact that 1 billion of the world's children are being exposed to violence and to toxic stress in their daily lives and families and communities.
So we really need to translate some of those global efforts into national plans, which already at that level and even local level have more of integration of different issues.
Yes, the child, you can't separate out these different domains of development. If a child does not feel safe, she will not be able to learn, right? So I think, unfortunately, we silo activities across ministries or within ministries for NGOs working in particular sectors rather than across them. And I think we need to bring, I think the lesson that ECD brings to the field of child and youth development is this need to be coordinated and integrated. And we need to bring that up through the lifespan, into primary and secondary education and into the transition to adulthood and livelihoods.
It's really the continuum. Thank you, Hero. I would like to introduce my big hero, Marta Santos Pais. And, you know, we have talked about all those great opportunities right now, great achievements with the Millennium Development Goals. Her Majesty was talking about the abuse and violence against children. So, Marta, you are Special Representative of Secretary General on Violence Against Children. And the world is, on one hand, making incredible progress. On the other hand, we probably have worse statistics than ever when it comes to children being abused, with all the conflicts going on in the world. And I was very moved by the report you released, I think it was in February, on 11,000 children that were killed because of the Syrian conflict and how many of them were tortured. Unfortunately, nobody wants to talk about it. What can we change and what can we do to ensure that we have special measures to prevent violence against children in the next global agenda?
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. I'm very struck by the fact that so many speakers, and starting with Her Majesty Queen Sylvia, placed emphasis on the impact of violence, and just now Hero reminding us of the billion children, at least, who suffer violence in so many forms. I would like to start by saying there is a huge opportunity, and Queen Sylvia reminded us that this year we are celebrating 25 years of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. We had a vision 25 years ago of a world where each and every child would grow up with confidence and happiness and feeling he or she belongs to the world. And perhaps in my work, the thing that strikes me the most is that so many children feel they are not allowed to belong there. They observe the world feeling left out, feeling, in fact, pushed out. And because education was touched so often, if we just think about how many girls are raped on the way to school, how many girls suffer sexual abuse in school, how many boys and girls suffer bullying and humiliation. And that pushes families to feel frightened and to keep children out of school. That leads boys and girls to, in fact, not going back to school. And if we think about one girl, as Irina Bukova was mentioning, who is in fact, who becomes pregnant as a result of this, the first temptation is to leave school. But in still so many countries, the law, in fact, forces the girl to get out of school. So there are so many things that, in fact, we need to address. But throughout these years, violence has been very invisible, and we need really to put it at the center of our considerations. Not to say that violence is everything in the new agenda, but we cannot afford to forget how much violence has an impact on rates of child mortality, on rates of maternal mortality. Early pregnant adolescents very often think suicide is the answer because they are not accepted by their families, their friends, their society. I'm coming from a meeting with children with albinism, just to give you that example, in so many countries around the world, especially in Africa. In so many communities, they are felt to bring bad luck. As a result, their limbs are cut and sold for someone in the black market to gain money just to be lucky in a local election or in having a fertile agricultural crop. So dramatic perceptions are still very rooted in society. And recent reports by so many colleagues in the UN, just signal how dramatic this is. A few quick 8% of the homicide victims are children below 15 years of age. It's huge. 90% of those who die are dying not in conflict situation, but in peaceful situations. So it's behind the door of the home. It's in the school. It is in care residential centers. It is in juvenile justice institutions. It's dramatic and pervasive. So we need to really expose it. But I think we have a great opportunity with the dreaming of the new agenda. First, certainly preserving the attention to violence against children. I believe it's very encouraging to see the wide consensus that has been built around the world through the many national consultations, thematic consultations, so many discussions in the UN, but in the local communities, very far from New York and very far from all of us, where everybody is saying, this is my first concern, and especially children are saying this, and that's what I would really like to stress. We have thousands of children who have been involved in this process, and they identified two priority concerns. The first one is education. Education, sense of belonging, dreaming of becoming something that they deserve to be. But at the same time, education as a tool to prevent violence, intolerance, stigmatization, exclusion. So a great tool to bring equity, as so many of you have mentioned, for instance. But the second thing is bringing violence to an end, because this is affecting their development, their health, their education, their sense of belonging and citizenship. And they know exactly what they want to see happening in the agenda. They say, we would like a priority which is clearly reflected in the agenda, and we want it cross-cutting in education, in gender equality, in safe cities, in so many areas that we keep talking about. So I think the vision is so present. There is wide consensus, but as several speakers before have said, we need to really join hands because this cannot be compromised, and many need to keep the pressure for this not to be forgotten in the ambition, which is legitimate, of perhaps making it more manageable if we think the number of goals or targets. But as we learned from the MDGs, in countries where violence is pervasive, the Sustainable Development Goals will not be achieved. So this is just the key for success, I think, really.
Well, thank you so much. I wish we had more time. I would like to thank all the panelists and give a round of applause to everybody. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce Henrik Holmqvist from the Global Child Forum. Oops. I'm sorry. I will introduce you and then you can introduce Joachim. Apparently a change in program. So it's a great opportunity for me to introduce Joke Brandt, who is Deputy Executive Director of UNICEF. And please, Joke.
Thank you very much, Joanna. And Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, thanks so much for being here, and thank you to you and the government and the people of Sweden to be such great champions for children. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and students, as others said, we hope that you will pick up this agenda and run with it, and preferably even faster than we have. Also, thank you to Jeff and the Earth Institute, to Columbia University, and to the Global Child Forum for inviting me. It's great to be here among so many great colleagues and friends, and allowing me to say a few words to this audience. As Jeff, as you just said, it's all about children and it's all about the future. But let me take you back 2,500 years ago, when the Chinese philosopher Confucius actually advised his students to study the past if you would define the future. And so today, while we're here and work together to envision a better world for children post-2015, I think it would be wise to follow his advice. As others said, we have the upcoming 25th anniversary of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and I think that gives us an opportunity to do exactly that, learn from our past to inform our future. And I think, as Marta just said, the CRC envisioned a better world. It revolutionized the way we thought about children and childhood, and its 54 articles articulate every child's right to health, to education, has been emphasized by so many people, a stimulating, secure environment, and free from want. In short, everything they need to ensure their dignity, to survive, and to thrive. So the question, I think, is, has the CRC made the world a better place for children? To answer that, UNICEF has looked at 25 years of data and presented it in one publication. And what the publication shows is that there are impressive gains, as others have also pointed out, because indeed children are far more likely to go to primary school, and the under 5 mortality rate has dropped by nearly 50%, as has the proportion of people living in extreme poverty. And more children benefit from access to safe water, sanitation, and nutrition, and are able to participate in matters that affect them. So the world is a better place for children today than it was 25 years ago. But, and I think that's an important lesson that we need to take into the post-2015 discussion, not for all children, not for the children who live in rural villages or urban slums, or in communities torn by conflict or catastrophe, or for those who are victims of discrimination based on gender, ethnicity, disability, or religion, nor for children who have little hope of escaping the poverty into which they were born. So we cannot claim that children's rights are being upheld when serious violations are inflicted upon children every day, boys recruited into armed militia, girls raped and married off to strangers, or when 250 million children fail to learn basic literacy or numeracy despite attending school, or when half of all children in low-income countries still live in extreme poverty, or when 17,000 young children die every day, largely from causes we can prevent, and when 1 in 4 children in least developed countries is engaged in child labor. And let's not forget that behind all these statistics is a child whose rights are violated, whose dreams to be a nurse or an engineer or a teacher or a model for that matter are not being fulfilled. So while we debate the SDGs and celebrate how far we have come, which we should, let's also remember that when talking about sustainability, progress is not sustainable until it's achieved universally. And let us also not forget that the world in which the CRC was written is vastly different to our world today, where there are more mobile phones than people, and personal computers are commonplace, where major conflicts rage, humanitarian crises grow, and climate change wreaks havoc on the most vulnerable, and where the world is increasingly urbanized. The debate around the future development goals is a chance to take new challenges for children into account, to reflect on our successes and failures, and to invest in all children by placing them at the center of the post-2015 agenda. With the CRC inspiring us, we can, and so we must, erase the inequities that rob children of their rights and thereby threaten global development goals. So what does that mean for the way we work? Well, certainly not business as usual, and I think others have already pointed out that, with the political will, and we actually know what to do. So let me just focus on one issue, and that is the importance of investing in innovation. Innovative tools, innovative thinking, and innovative partnerships. This means trying, and yeah, sometimes failing, but learning. And it means enabling communities to create their own solutions. And it means keeping pace with the latest developments and adapting our programs so that we can reach those now forgotten by the MDGs. The latest findings around early childhood development, and we've heard that discussed just in the panel, I think are a great example of such new thinking. Because as recent science has found out that during the first years of life, the majority of a child's energy actually goes into forming those connections in the brain, which determine a child's future physical and mental health, capacity to learn, and future success. And it was also found that to develop optimally, the brain needs proper nutrition, like breastfeeding, and stimulating activities, like reading, and healthy interactions, like cuddling, and of course, protection from violence and abuse. In short, what these findings underline is the importance of investing in all these areas of a child's development, starting from the very first days in life when inequities begin and when they can also be prevented. Another example of innovative thinking and new partnerships is U-Report. First developed in Uganda, U-Report is an SMS-based service that uses real-time information to inform programs, and it enables policymakers and local partners to ask questions to more than 250,000 people. So how does it work? When answers to a question, what would you feed a 6-month-old baby, range from breast milk to fish, it clearly points out which communities need further support. But U-Report isn't just about receiving information, it is also about creating real-time information loops so that we can meet requests with action. With a local developer in Zambia, we adapted U-Report to connect young people to HIV counselors. And we failed. And the feedback we got was our messages were too formal. They sounded like old people. So we enlisted young people to write new messages. And the result was that 50,000 new U-Reporters were recruited, and a rise in voluntary testing rates among them from 20 to 43%. And why? Because they had found out that you better ask the questions anonymously. The next step we're taking is to take U-Report to scale, enabling partners around the world to benefit. And earlier this week, UNICEF launched Rapid Pro. And just think of that as a kind of open source app store for international development where apps like U-Report, but also others, and not just created, of course, by UNICEF, can be downloaded. We are planning in the near future to launch apps for registering children after emergencies and for tracking health supplies, and we hope that many more will follow. And I strongly believe that it's this kind of thinking and these kind of partnerships that we must embrace if we're to define a future in which we will deliver on our promise, our commitment for children's rights. Because 25 years ago, the CRC set a high standard for humanity. It compelled us to think differently and act decisively on behalf of children everywhere. And now as we engage in discussions around the post-2015 agenda, let that promise of the CRC and our commitment to it inspire us, not to work even harder, but also to be daring and to think innovatively,
to reach the most marginalized. And looking around this room, I think we have that commitment, and I think we have the partnerships to make it work. So I'm really excited about what I think we can achieve for children together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joka, and thank you to UNICEF for all the fantastic good things that you are doing all around the world. Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, all friends in the House. The Minister of Rwanda said, just do it. Now it's time for us to really look how we should do it. And for that, I'm really happy to introduce to you 5 excellent new panelists from different perspectives, all very market-driven, and all focus on achieving partnerships. We have a world leader in disaster preparedness and public health that teamed up with superstar Paul Simon to combat poor health of kids here in New York City. We have Irvin. We have a tough businessman who runs a corporate foundation in the best interest of the children, with exciting partnerships with both the UN agencies and NGOs. We have Per Hegenes. We have an extremely exciting new initiative from the clothing giant H&M that went out to the public with an open election on what they should support. Really interesting to follow their development. Helena? And we have one of the brightest entrepreneurs out of Sweden that, instead of building a private company and earning a private fortune, started a lottery that gives over $200 million a year to the NGO sectors. Please, Nicholas. And last but not least, we're extremely happy and fortunate to have Mr. Corporate Sustainability of the United Nations in the House. Thank you very much, Georg, to join us also here today. Global Compact, with over 12,000 corporate participants and stakeholders in over 145 countries in the world. So, what do we hope to learn here today? One thing, of course, that comes out of mind is, how do we break the silos? How can we work more in partnerships, and how can we achieve more? How do we get different actors from different sectors to trust each other and work together in the best interest of the child? Because we want action, we want concrete results, and we want good practices and great examples. And that is the challenge that I'm asking you all to think of today. I think we'll start with you, Per. Everyone knows about IKEA, the informal Swedish embassy of the world. IKEA Foundation now, 5, 6, 7 years down the line, always conscious, very child-focused. You advocate for UN agencies and other organizations to think more like business, to approach challenges differently, to drive innovation, to look for smarter and more cost-effective ways of getting things done. So, Per, do we see any progress on that? Do we see any? I mean, UN agencies is not the first thing comes to mind when talks about progress organizations.
Oh, there's a lot of innovation happening in UN agencies, some of which we have been part of, try to drive, and some that happens without our help, but we just to make it visible and make it come to the surface and make sure it helps drive change in policies. So I think your question was really about innovation, about how we change, and what we're trying to do at the IKEA Foundation and IKEA is really keep things simple and never be happy and satisfied, but look for ways to improve all the time. That's part of the culture, and that's the culture we try to instill with our partners as well, and that's going really well. So we're on a track there. I think there's so many things that private sector business can do to help work together with the government, with UN organizations, with NGOs to help improve on the issues that we just discussed this morning. I will try to give a couple of examples because we try to keep things simple in our organization. So instead of talking about the general stuff, I can give you a couple of examples. And the first example is something that every single business in the world can do, and that is starting to adhere to what's called child rights business principles, which is a concept framework, probably the most comprehensive framework that was ever developed, together with business, Save the Children, UNICEF, and Global Compact, to actually lay out the guidelines and recommendations for how businesses should act in their work to protect children's rights and enable children to have the kind of opportunities that we talked about this morning. So every business can do that regardless of which business are you in. You can do it for your own business, for your own employees, for your supply chain. And if you do that, you can achieve amazing results for children alone by doing that. The second example is really business can help work with organizations to drive innovation, think differently about how we establish systems and structures and sustainable and scalable programs to address issues such as health, education, and livelihood development that will all benefit children over the long term. Even in a crisis situation that we're facing in West Africa today on Ebola, I think there are limits to how much funding that can come out of the bilaterals. Today, everyone is stretched, and I think the business needs to stand up and take their part of the responsibility and provide funding for these great organizations that are on the ground trying to fight an increasing epidemic with very limited resources. And we see this every day. It's about the resources, about boots on the ground, about resources to be able to actually stem this tide. And that's something private sector should think about as well as the bilateral. So let's look at this as a call to action to the private sector. A third area is really about taking knowledge, taking experience that exists in the private sector and apply it together with organizations, with NGOs, with governments. As I said, gave a good example of how Gavi works with the pharmaceutical industry and the financial industry to provide solutions and access to cheaper vaccines for children in the poorest areas of the world. That's a good example of a cooperation between an organization and private sector to find solutions that otherwise wouldn't be available. There's lots of opportunities for any company to take their experience, their knowledge, and engage, such as we do at IKEA when it comes to the area of logistics, for example, helping the logistics with the UN and other organizations to operate more efficiently so they can reduce costs and provide more money against the people, and especially the children they're trying to help. There are huge opportunities in the technology sector, and I have several colleagues who work very hard from the technology perspective to drive efficiency and create opportunities matched with technology that otherwise weren't there, and therefore provides better quality to the people we're trying to help. Any company can find an opportunity to do that if they look for it. The fourth area I wanted to talk about is really market access. For certain companies, it's possible to create market access and drive livelihood development in a way that benefits children. So an example for us, for example, is we have programs to empower women in poor communities in Asia, especially in Asia, in India. And we empower women and give them opportunities to have an income stream that didn't exist before. We work with IKEA to provide market opportunities and use them as an incubator to sell the products that the women will manufacture in the local rural communities. And by creating that market access in the beginning, we can help build businesses that over time will be sustainable for these women. And why are we doing this? What does it have to do with children? Well, of course, we know that if women have the opportunity to make money, they will invest it in children's health and education. And that's how we indirectly use women's empowerment to improve the lives of children in all the communities that we operate.
You talked about the children's rights and business principles. And Georg, you were one of the founding fathers of the principles, and with strong leadership and with the help of Ursula and your colleagues really got that through. How do you feel that these questions are being taken on today? I mean, we did a study with BCG not very long ago, released at the Global Child Forum at the Royal Palace in Stockholm, where it showed that The knowledge is not that big. We still have a long journey to go. But what is your feel? How do you feel in your 12,000 companies and all over the world? How are these being taken on?
Thank you very much, and allow me first to say that I think nobody should underestimate the fundamentally important role of business in shaping values, in behavior, and in impacting the prospects of children. It's at the workplace, in the community, in the marketplace. And as foreign direct investment now is 5 times ODA, that role continues to grow. And as business development is embraced by all countries around the world, it is fundamentally important that business itself, the way it conducts itself, drives forward values that support the causes of children and other priority issues of the United Nations. And this is why the Compact was launched initially, just to remind everybody, there are 10 principles covering human rights, workplace, the environment, and good governance, anti-corruption. It wasn't until 2010 that we embarked seriously on the causes of children, and Her Excellency, Her Majesty Queen Silva of Sweden has really given us a big push on your forum in collaboration with UNICEF and Save the Children. The children's rights and business principles are now well known, so to speak. We rolled them out in 40 countries. Just 2 weeks ago in Uganda, another country launch is upcoming in UAE, I believe, mostly conducted by our country networks. The Compact now has 80 country networks, and this creates enormous awareness. Then comes the next step: how does business actually practically change its own behavior? It's how business makes its money, which is the most important footprint on development, and how does it collaborate with others. And here there's some encouraging news, at least that's what we hear back from many countries. The children's causes are increasingly mainstreamed in the corporate sustainability agenda. The future marketplace is seen in children, so being responsible, not doing harm, and supporting is seen increasingly as a value. And that is very important because it speaks to the self-motivating forces of the private sector. So we have to drive these principles far deeper into the business behavior. There are many tools out there now in many languages. We're very proud of this. It needs to be owned locally as well as driven, pushed globally, and that is key. And I do want to refer to this new website, which is joined by all partners who are working with business, the childrenandbusiness.org website, where all tools in many languages are now available. But clearly, long way to go. On a personal note, allow me to say the following. In the end, it's about values and ethics and the willpower to make things happen. In the end, business people are people like everybody else. You find in all companies real champions, and that is great. And Sweden has given us so much motivation, frankly, in this area. But we need to spread this value-driven business behavior far wider and far deeper. With 8,000 corporate participants currently, this is just a fraction of the 50,000 publicly listed companies. There are tens of millions of private companies and small and medium-sized companies, so there's still a long way to go, but the momentum is growing. An encouraging side news is that investors increasingly pay attention to these issues. They integrate it into valuation and decision-making because bad behavior should be punished and should be a risk, and that is increasingly recognized, and good behavior should be rewarded. And there's a huge movement going on in the institutional investor community currently, Principles for Responsible Investment, which recognize that this kind of behavior has material implications for long-term behavior. In short, financial success increasingly is tied with social responsibility, environmental stewardship, and good governance. But to get this really into the marketplace on a massive scale, we need to do much more. And maybe the young people here could actually challenge all those companies which are still sitting on a fence and basically free riding on the value dimension, and challenge them. Why aren't you integrating the children's rights and business principles into your strategy and operations? Still much to be done, but global interdependence offers the opportunity to work with business on a massive scale and to also deliver solutions on a much bigger scale than ever before was it possible.
Excellent. I urge everybody to go into that website and look at it. It's a fantastic tool and a good inspiration for companies on how to really work with these questions. I was sitting at the audience at a conference a few months ago, and one of the speakers said, no matter how well written a declaration might be, it can never excuse us from doing real work. And that was you, Niklas. And symptomatic, very hands-on and very market-driven. Could you briefly explain what you do, how you do it, and how that brings so much to so many people around the world in need?
Of course, and starting from the value-driven business behavior that you were looking for, let me give you the picture. 1950, on a dirt road in the townships of Soweto in South Africa. A 12-year-old boy is running around kicking a food can because he can't afford a football. And his life is lacking a lot. It's lacking education, economic wealth, but it's not lacking love. And therefore, his childhood, when he looks upon it, is a decent childhood. He became a very strong young boy. And one day he stood in Sharpeville, standing up for his child rights and his human rights. And they were standing in front of the police, and they shot right into his group of friends. 9 of them were children, 69 were killed. Helped by the local business, the global NGOs, and the Royal Kingdom of Sweden, he was greeted and accepted to get a second chance in Sweden. And he got an education. He married a Swedish woman, and he got some own children, and I am one of them. I think business leaders are just people, like you said. And therefore, if there is a will, there is a way. Our way has been to run a business. We call the concept market-driven charity. Normally, you take a business, and if you're a good player, you take a few percentage off to support NGOs that do good in this world. Our way has been to take a few percentage for the private profit so we can reinvest in the business to expand it and take the entire profit and donate it into the NGOs of this world. And therefore, this tiny business who sells lottery tickets and TV game shows, things that you really don't need, is being sold on 2 small markets in Sweden and in Holland. But on the other hand, donating 100% of the profit made us the second largest private-initiated donor in the world after Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So can we have an impact? I think we can, not by ourselves, but together with the NGOs. And therefore, the partnerships with the NGOs is the key here. We know how to make money, but we don't know better than the receiving end how to implement it. So therefore, you can say that, and I'm going to give you 2 figures. That's the only thing you have to remember. Since we started, we have injected in local grassroots NGOs and global NGOs like UNICEF, Amnesty, World Wildlife Fund, and we're happy to work together with Jeffrey Sachs and his leadership, $6 billion. And that's only from 2 markets that we're profitable in. Imagine if we had 20 markets. Businesses have 3 things that I think are truth. First of all, we have an unbureaucratic decision system compared to politicians and policy makers and institutions. Therefore, we can be very, very quick in making decisions, so we can be a catalyst. Secondly, business leaders, yes, we are obsessed. We are obsessed with measuring things. We love measuring things, and I think we should continue doing that, measuring results. Thirdly, just because we have a big wallet, I don't think we should decide how the receiving end should implement things. I believe strongly that the business community should take the opportunity to not mix up the urge of measuring the results and steering the funds. I believe strongly, we believe strongly in unrestricted funds. If you believe in the leadership of the receiving NGO, then you can invest in that leadership. If you don't believe in the leadership, don't go there. So that's what we have a huge opportunity to do, and I urge other leaders to actually follow up on that. Now, I was inspired by H&M and their leadership now, and how they go from their global agenda straight down to a small but important initiative in Harlem. And I was emailing some of my colleagues in Europe now, and I asked them, what is our commitment 2014 for children, for education, for health, for children's rights? And it will be, by the end of this year, 250, here comes the second figure. First one was 6 billion, remember. This is the second one. 250 million US dollars that we will commit for children through NGOs.
Jumping straight down to the local level then, and to the city of New York. Irvin, plans of coordinated actions are required in all geographies, and particularly to reach the most vulnerable and at-risk children. How can coordinated actions and innovative partnerships among different players make a difference globally, but also just a few blocks away from here in New York?
Thanks. You know, the United States and New York City in particular are very enigmatic. No one around the world thinks of us and thinks of an impoverished country, which comes down to this principle that Mayor de Blasio ran on, which talks about the tale of two cities, or the tale of two countries. And the fact of the matter is that as recently as 2 weeks ago, I was trying to explain to a new corporate partner from outside the United States why it is that America has this ingrained, stagnant reality of not only inequity between two ends of the spectrum, but a growing inequity. And it's very complex, and our challenges here are really great. 1 in 5 American children live in poverty. 1 in 4 children in New York City live in poverty. Another 30% of New York City's children live in families who are near poverty. And they are literally blocks from here, an easy walk from here. As of July, there were 38,000 reports of potential child abuse and neglect just in this city, nearly 3 million a year in the United States overall. 2 months ago, I got personally involved in a situation about a report that that revealed that children as young as 7 and 8 years of age were working in U.S. tobacco fields in 4 different states in the United States to, quote unquote, help the family income, et cetera. So I want to get beyond this notion that we do have or don't have tremendous problems in the United States. We absolutely do. And one of the things that in my role is at the Earth Institute in our program on child well-being and resiliency, in addition to our foundation, the Children's Health Fund, is we try to take microcosms of the challenges and find solutions to working with those, but keeping in mind the big picture. In a sense, we think locally and think globally simultaneously. That's our MO, basically. But I will tell you that it would be virtually impossible to do what we do, which is direct services in a very collaborative way with other service providers, solve problems. It would be impossible to do this if we were dependent on any one sector alone. It just simply does not work. 85% of the infrastructure in the United States is in the private sector's hands. It is an imperative that we're all in this together, not only for the practical reasons, but also for the message that it matters to all of us and to our futures that we solve these massive problems. I want to say a couple of things about the stagnancy of situations in the United States. At some level, our poverty is invisible
in a way that it is not in a developing country. It's here, it's just not focused on, because people are looking at the other data points, for example, that show the economic success stories. But intermixed in there is a growing population of children who are not growing up as we'd like them to be growing up, and are not going to be able to fulfill not only the American dream, but the dreams they have for themselves. 1990 or 1991, as a pediatrician, I was seeing a child, very impoverished child, at a shelter for foster children in Brooklyn, New York. And I walk into the back examining room and I meet William, a 10-year-old kid, who's obviously a poor and distressed child. And in the course of my usual pediatric banter with the child, I said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And William said, "I want to be a paleontologist." And I gathered myself together and I said, "William, what is a paleontologist?" He said, "Somebody who works with dinosaurs and is interested in, finding new dinosaurs, etc." And I said, "Well, that's right. And how do you know about that?" He goes to his pocket and he takes out literally a yellowed, wrinkled article from the New York Times a year before that somebody had given to him about paleontology. And after I got over my speechlessness, I thought about this child before me in an examining room in a shelter in Brooklyn, and thinking about the chances of this child actually becoming a paleontologist and the barriers that confronted him compared to the barriers that did not confront my own children and my grandchildren and everyone else in my own social circle. I tried to track him, but he was in the homeless system, and I never did. And one of the big regrets of my career is not being able to follow William to see if he's on the road to becoming a paleontologist. But the bet is that he's not. And that fact is a major problem for America and for the world. And I guess I just want to resonate with this concept of all of us rallying around the critical, central importance of every child being educated as the way to give every child a chance that goes to every corner of this earth. And all of us who do whatever we do, whether we're working on clean water or working on healthcare, it's like in a big motor race. We have pit stops. We're in the pit stops. The goal of us is to keep those engines tuned up and ready to make it to the finish line. My job as a pediatrician, keep this child healthy. Your job as an educator, keep them educated. Your job is in government, make sure the policies and the resources are there. But at the end of the day, the winning idea here is for children to grow up safe, educated, and ready. Ready for what? Ready to fulfill their own dreams, ready for the world, and ready to make a difference in a positive way in the next generation. This is why the rallying cry around education is so critical here. So the final point I want to make is, so when it comes right down to it, what do we need to do? Well, we need to find partners like the H&M Conscious Foundation, because they immediately resonated with what we were suggesting. Let's take a few schools in some very poor areas of New York City and do what we need to do so that the teacher in front of the class is at least not worried about health issues that are barriers to learning. And this is the key here, to find those resonant partnerships that will make a difference in individual lives and that are imminently replicable and scalable, so that at the end of the day, we can all pat each other on the back and say, we're making progress towards educating the world's children. It starts locally, but we're thinking globally.
Excellent, thank you. Helena, I would like to come over to your side and ask you, you are now the head of a new foundation, and with a very household name, of course. Everybody have something, probably from IKEA, not from H&M. You are totally, and you are bringing a lot more than nice clothes and a charming supermodel to this place. You're bringing in a very new concept, and I would like you to just briefly explain the thoughts behind it and how you want to do it. I find it very interesting the thing of actually going out to your coworkers and customers, asking them to put your focus for you. Please.
Thank you, Henrik.
Yes, the H&M Conscious Foundation, just like Alec Weck was talking about earlier, is quite new. And we really want to drive impact and try to change the lives of people and make a difference as much as possible. So we have identified 3 focus areas that we do 3 large global programs within. And just as you said, Henrik, we actually invited the H&M customers and employees to help us select what were those 3 main areas that they thought were the most immediate. And they are education, clean water, and strengthening women. So what we try to do is try to create impact for children on different levels. So if we look at our education program, what we do there is we try to focus on the early years, so early childhood development and early learning, because we know through all the facts that this is where you can make a huge difference in the foundation of a child to make sure that the child will continue to go to school and learn. And Alec Weck was also talking about the specific program we're doing with UNICEF in this matter. And then if we go to our second program, which is clean water, if children then have a good foundation to learn, we want them to stay in school. And this can be a problem when kids become teenagers if there's no clean water and sanitation in schools, especially for young girls when they menstruate. So then what we do is we want to provide clean water and toilets to school to really make sure that kids, especially girls, can finish school. And then when we look at our third program, which is about strengthening women, if a girl finishes her school, which of course we want her to do, we want to empower her when she becomes a woman. We want to make sure that she is not locked down by the barriers that hold women back. And we want to strengthen her economically by making her able to earn her own money. And we do that through skills training or also seed funding through a lasting change fund that we have. And when women start to work and they start to make their own money, they need someone to take care of their kids. And then we're back in our first program. So they're all very interlinked, and they sort of follow a child through different stages and different levels. But of course, to have an impact, we also need to change policy work. So that's why in each of the 3 global programs, we really have a core element of policy change so that we can create settings for this change to happen and have an impact on children. And then we have to work with large organizations who can drive that change, like UNICEF, for example. And of course, as you mentioned then, we have a fantastic opportunity because we're linked to H&M, one of the largest fashion companies in the world, and we have a great platform from which we can talk and advocate about the rights of children. And we can do this by including young people all over the world because we believe that young people should be included in this. So on the platform of H&M, we can talk about what are the needs of children, what can we do to make a difference, and show positive stories of change. So in that, we hope that we can sort of make some difference for children.
Excellent. I had about 10 pages of follow-up questions to you all. Sadly, I mean, we are running out of time, and I need to thank you all for your participation. And I would also like to urge, I mean, the people that have questions and the ones that are staying behind, have the opportunity to stay a couple of minutes after this. Please don't hesitate to grab anyone and ask them your question. And with this, I would like from Global Child Forum to thank Joanna and Jeff, the Columbia University Earth Institute and the SDSN for a brilliant collaboration. I think we'll do that next year again, not the least so I can use all my questions, but also that so we can follow up on this. And with this, I would like to thank you, and I would like to give the floor to Jeff Sachs to finalize this. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Henrik.
Wow. For the students here, that was pretty special, actually. You've seen the world's leaders of promoting children's well-being before our eyes today, and we've been able to host them here, which is an incredible privilege. And I also want to thank our students for their commitment, because they are deeply engaged in all of these issues at the Earth Institute, in many startups, in many activities, in magazines, in forums, and so forth. So can we up front give a hand for the children, the children and the students who support the children. You're doing a great job, and we're very proud of our students here. We've come to the end of a remarkable group of presentations. Of course, we covered a lot of ground very quickly because we talked about a lot of subjects, health and education, the role of business, changing technology, the threats, the challenges, the post-2015 world. And I move that we do convene again next year because it will be the occasion of the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals. Let's convene and celebrate children at the heart of the SDGs next year and continue to work together to plot our way forward. We're going to announce formally very shortly this wonderful partnership with the H&M Conscious Foundation and the Earth Institute and the Children's Health Fund. So that's very exciting. We'll have a press briefing shortly about that. This is a wonderful project, and we're really deeply thrilled to be working together with an H&M Foundation on this. The final bit of business is that we would like to have a statement of our joint commitment come out of this meeting. And it's a little bit tricky to spring a statement, which you haven't even seen yet, but I'm going to read bits of it, take a general acclamation, and then we're going to put it online and email it to all of you for really some edits and wordsmithing and so forth, and within a week have a formal statement to come out of the meeting together. So this is a statement called Children in the Age of Sustainable Development, a Joint Commitment, and I'll just read a little bit of it to give you the idea. It has a preamble, core principles, and investing in children, an action plan. Children embody the hopes of humanity. They are our future, and we pursue sustainable development on their behalf. And then there are lots of footnotes, this being an academic community, so I won't read the footnotes. Children have the right to thrive, develop to their full potential, and to live in a sustainable world. Fulfillment of child rights is the moral and legal obligation of all governments. It is also the smartest investment that governments can make. Investing in children is essential for achieving all aspects of sustainable development. Children are the future workforce and drivers of economic growth and development, and are also the future guardians of a sustainable world and its natural resources. Investing in children is the indispensable investment. Core principles. 1, holistic development. The goals for children's development go far beyond survival. They combine physical, cognitive, social, emotional, and moral domains of learning and development. We cannot selectively choose one aspect from these. Societies are based on the development of the whole child. 2nd, universality of reach. All children have the right to the best start in life, irrespective of where they were born or where they live. They have the right to survive, thrive, and realize their full potential without fear of violence, abuse, neglect, maltreatment, or exploitation. And 3, multi-generational development. Childhood represents the period of life up to 18 years, with different age groups having distinct needs and wants. Child-integrated approaches should target initiatives across this span in a manner consistent with the evolving capacities of the child. There is also a need for a multi-generation program that promotes primary caregivers' parenting skills, physical and mental health, human capital development, and poverty reduction, as well as direct health and education supports for children and youth. And then how must we act? First, to foster cooperation among governments, international organizations, business, philanthropy, and civil society actors to support the realization of children's rights. Second, we agreed to create an international impetus to raise global resources for children everywhere and to program these funds at the national and local level from both public and private sources of funding to maximize the impact of every dollar spent. 3, to support the mobilization of adequate official and private development assistance to facilitate the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, with an emphasis on the new and effective pooled financing mechanisms for children's health, education, and nutrition. 4, to coordinate programs and policies across health, education, nutrition, violence prevention, and social protection in an integrated manner. 5, to prioritize the needs of primary caregivers and families to strengthen their education, learning, and physical, mental, and economic well-being in tandem with direct support for the empowerment, participation, and welfare of children and youth. And 6, to coordinate the assessment of initiatives both within and across sectors and strengthen the evidence-based research, harnessing real-time data through the use of technology where possible to understand what's working, what's not, and how we can replicate and scale up the highest impact interventions. So we would like everybody to be signatories to that. Hearing no objections, we adopt it by acclamation, but we will circulate it for everybody to read with care. I don't know if the students here registered online and therefore we have your emails, but I would like all of you to sign as well. And so we will find a way to post this and at the Earth Institute so that you can sign on as well. So let me once again thank Your Majesty and thank Your Royal Highness for inspiring us and bringing us together, and thank all the leaders and the future leaders in the room for the wonderful work that you do. And have a good day.